What's going on? Welcome to another show, the Research to Reps Roundtable. I'm your co-host, Dr. Pat Ivey, and I have some really good guests lined up. But let's get to our co-host first. Dr. Ted, what's up?
How's it going, Pat? Looking
Oh, it's
forward to this great list of Aggies we have with us today.
Oh yeah, we're going to see what's going on down there in College Station. Dr. Ernie Reimer. Ernie, what's going on?
I'm doing great. I hope everyone's doing well. I mean, honestly, I just put my thinking cap on because, these guys that we have on this call today, they're gonna take us to school. And I know that Dr. Mann just put on his big dark rimmed glasses, so I know things are gonna get geeky. I can't even speak straight right now. I'm like a kid right now because my idols are on this call. But we got Bo Sandoval, Scott Battley, and Dr. Bryan Mann. How are you guys doing today?
Man, doing great. Thanks for having us, guys. Appreciate you.
Definitely. Thanks a ton for having us. We're looking forward to the chat. This should be an entertaining one.
Agree. This one's going to be fun.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and kick it off. I know that, Bo, you've been there for maybe less than 2 years.
It's 2 years in December. So right,
years.
just hit the 2-year mark. Yes. Sir.
Okay. And Dr. Bryan Mann, you've been down there for a few months.
Yeah, 6, I think, maybe 7.
6. All right. Well, I don't know.
Short term, baby. But yeah, it's going well. And then Scott here, he's the old man on the mountain.
I'm the veteran here. Been here 7 years.
There you go.
Wow.
Now that's just professionally, Scott. That what about your time total in Aggie land here?
Started undergrad 2010, and I haven't left besides one stint at the University of Tennessee. So I don't know how many was that. 14 years total.
Well, it's amazing that you all are all down there. So even where to start, this is a more difficult one. So Research to Reps Roundtable, that's the title of the podcast. The theme is, how do we take research, literature, science into practical application? Bryan, everyone, I can't go anywhere and without people being amazed that I know you. So that's a good thing.
Well, people are always amazed I know you. So there you go.
All right. Well, I tell you what, let's go ahead and kick it off and just tell us, what are you all working on down there?
Taking over the world, to be quite honest, that's why I came here, is with the resources of Texas A&M, trying to put out the best potential student that we can, with the NSCA's move to being, for the accreditation model. I don't know if I can say, can I talk about that on this? I just want to make sure. Okay.
It's all good.
Yeah, I just didn't know. So, with their accreditation model come 2030, how you have to, be through an accredited program, right? I had the opportunity to come here after giving a talk on campus last April, and they're like, hey, we're going to go ahead and do this thing. You want to come with us? I'm like, sure, man. So, it was great having, Bo already here, having a pre-existing relationship with him. We started working on that lifts course, which is now called something different. I can't remember what Eric McMahon told me it was. It's FCL, and I can't remember what that stands for. But yeah, no. So I came here to get that going, and already having the pre-existing relationships with athletics. It's made things super quick, super fast, super easy. So the main thing that we're working on right now is that we're trying to find, some better ways to build a mousetrap of what the things that we've already got, and then just applying a little bit of the scientific method here and there. There's nothing earth-shattering that's going on yet, but you just got to give me time for that one. So we'll get there. It's just, and one of the things that I'd always learned from you was, hey, we got to do the most with the least. You can't add in something without taking something away. So right now we're starting to look at, hey, what are the low-hanging fruits? What are the things that we've already been doing? Which Scott has been here for, like he said, 7 years in his role, a total of 14. He does a lot of things extremely well. but sometimes he gets lost in in that you can't see the forest for the trees. So busy with just the day-to-day operations that you can't step back and look from 35,000 feet. Where here I am, I'm just like, do. Hey, did you look at this yet? No, where did that come from? Well, this, and this. So kind of the biggest thing that we're doing right now is looking at the stuff that's already done and seeing where can we find clues and where to go next.
Yeah, I would add to that. I mean, the title of this podcast kind of says it beautifully, research to reps, but how many places have we been historically where to get access to people that have time dedicated to research, that you can have a day-to-day, minute-to-minute relationship with, to be able to take some of that research or some of those tidbits within the research process and put that into practical application. It's pretty rare. I've never had it at a university prior to being here. It was an opportunity. It wasn't something that was already, fully established, but they were definitely building it prior to my arrival here. And there's some key parts like a Dr. Bryan Mann who just helped accelerate that relationship. So now, yeah, when we are getting investigative in our training and want to take a deeper dive into something, you have a motivated unit over there that wants to take a closer look, a deeper analysis than what we may have time for as practitioners. But then also have the willingness to break that information and those analytics down to where we can have a cross-pollinating conversation and eventually turn that research into actual repetitions. So it is something that I wouldn't say has always existed here, but is picking up a ton of steam and momentum, which now we're starting to see that there are many fruits to that labor, including a more robust crop of young aspiring professionals coming through our undergraduate and graduate programs that want to get into coaching, that want to get into data analytics, or want to get into sports science. And now they've actually got not only some good research pathways to learn about it, they're getting themselves caught up in some practical application and seeing some of the best in the world kind of dive through the process and try to provide live, breathing, full-time, high-level Division I athletics coaches use that information to empower their strategies on the field. It's a pretty fun time to be involved with that whole process, from the books and the nerds all the way to the jocks and the meatheads, and kind of putting it all together. It's been a fun process. It's got a lot of energy, a lot of positive momentum at the moment. But I will also say it's very much in its infancy, and we've got a lot of work to do still on getting that to be more culture and more of just how people speak the language here on a day-to-day.
I think a cool note on Bo's point, and again, I think we have a kind of unique model. And again, I think Ernie can probably talk about his model there when it comes to sports science. We have a PhD fellow program that allows, like, we have embedded young practitioners who are getting their PhD here in the kinesiology department and some other departments, but mostly kinesiology. And they are also embedded in athletics, to where they have a few teams that they're overseeing the sports science service, but the goal is for them to obviously do a dissertation, produce research when it comes to elite athletics. So we're still very, very new in this. Our first PhD fellow started, I believe, in 2021. So she's in year 3. Madison Therese is our first one, and she's getting close to publishing that information. Our second one, Drew Smith's coming up soon. He's working with basketball, doing a lot of good stuff there. So it takes that kind of model to get that going, but also great people like a Dr. Mann coming here and helping us with that research question of, all right, what's obviously going to be good out there in the literature and the world of athletics, but also help us here at Texas A&M get to where we need to be.
Hey, I got a question for Bo. Your experiences at the UFC, what were some of the ones that you thought would be or were most beneficial in terms of implementing at Texas A&M?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, I mean, historically, not just for myself and my own experiences, but speaking with my colleagues over the years at a variety of different stops, and then hearing from students currently, a gap that seems to be maybe not as thoroughly touched upon throughout practical education experiences, internships, even through curriculums, is energy system analysis and development. And that's something I would say we spent 85% of our time on understanding true energy system dynamics of a fighter, which are like a decathlete. I mean, you kind of have to go from the extreme end of high anaerobic outputs to the far end of high aerobic sustainability. So we had to take a deep dive, not only in how we wanted to analyze those energy systems, but how they interacted with each other, what the demands were based off of the style of fighter. Strikers use energy very differently than your wrestler grapplers. Your 125-pound male flyweights use energy very differently than our 265-pound heavyweights. And so in doing that, it almost became a daily language. That was a part of our daily diagnostic bouts. That was a part of our analysis onboarding a new fighter. That was part of our analysis revisiting some diagnostics with a veteran fighter. And then taking those types of processes and say, okay, well, we understand something like the repetitive anaerobic nature of a tennis player. Well, if you look at the majority of energy system build out from diagnostic to prescription in a college tennis player, they're typically not diving that deep into it and understanding, well, what style do they play? Is this a high volley repetition player who's played a lot overseas, who averages 28 to 36 hits per volley? Or is this a big power hitter, someone that's killing it, serve, return, kill, or serve, kill, serve, ace, ace, ace. Those types of players, they use energy very differently. You could go on and on with breaking down energy systems amongst an offensive unit of a football team and how an offensive lineman may utilize energy compared to your slot receiver. And really understanding, are we meeting the demands not only from a physical preparation standpoint, but are we meeting the demands from a fueling standpoint? We were pretty blown away once you start to dive into the heavy analytics of how someone uses energy in something like a VO2 max assessment and figuring out, man, we have fighters that generally don't know how to metabolize. They don't know how to oxidize fat. Well, that's a problem when you're trying to expand on aerobic capabilities. And so then we dive into some dietetic diagnostics and understanding, well, one, what is their food makeup made of? What's their intake look like? And then two, based off what they intake, what's their efficiency around metabolism? And so we would figure out, we'd have some people that just sitting at rest like we are right now, they're predominantly burning carbohydrate. Well, that type of fighter is going to have a really hard time adapting to oxidative type of conditioning bouts. If that's the target, hey, when you expand their aerobic system, if we didn't take that deeper analytical dive and understanding, well, they have issues with metabolizing fat. That would be the first barrier that we need to overcome, which can be an intervention both from a dietary standpoint and a training standpoint. And those are things that we're kind of starting a lot of our students out with understanding right from the jump, because every sport requires capacity. So whether you're, everybody's like, well, a thrower, they throw once, they sit down for 8 minutes and then they throw again. But if you go through a throwing workout, there's upwards of 40 to 80 repetitions within a practice. So it's not like you're just training for the 8th attempt competition. You're training for the repetitive 60 to 80 effort practice that you've got to do with different implements kind of week to week. So there is a capacity factor in there. So starting these aspiring coaches and practitioners with an understanding that capacity, one, is necessity, and then two, what it takes to be able to sustain that amount of work. We can't just take it for granted and say, well, it's an 18 to 22-year-old kid, their batteries just last. Well, if you're talking about the upper 5% that we're trying to get to win national championships, the people that they're edging out for the silver and bronze medals, it's a big difference in who can, or I should say, it's a winning difference in who can sustain those outputs over time with not only more precise results, but doing it repetitively, especially, a lot of this stuff is on demand. We do get to periodize out some of it, but when you start qualifying for junior world championships and different Pan Am games and things along those lines, agile periodization is definitely a thing, but robust and available energy systems. It's just something that I know when I was doing my master's degree at Southern Mississippi, it was in there. We understood energy metabolism. We went over it. We understood how muscles break that stuff down and how it gets utilized, but really taking an interventional approach and how you upskill an athlete that doesn't have that capacity. I would say that's something that was definitely missing. That's a lot, but we can take those into any direction that you'd like to. But I would say kind of making that a staple, it's part of a daily conversation is, well, what's our, even though, okay, we're lifting weights today, well, what's our emphasis around energy systems, what the type of weightlifting that we're doing today, and how's that influencing our ability to expand our capacity to do more work, to be able to play our game at a higher level more repetitively. That's more of the direction that we're steering a lot of the conversation. Not to neglect the thing that we've historically been really good at in North America, which is power output, relative and absolute increases in strength and power. There's no doubt about that. We've got a lineage of practitioners who've handed down just a litany of knowledge on how to do that in several dynamic different fashions. But I do believe that spending the time on that understanding of energy systems and how we influence that over time, right from Jump Street, I think is a really critical one.
I want to throw a curveball in here. So, Ernie, I know you've been a couple of places, being, I believe whenever I met you the first time, you were a student at University of Utah working at US Ski and Snowboard. How at Louisville is it, the same and different from Utah and your experiences there with US Ski and Snowboard? I don't know if you're having to have your sports scientist go and make the tools from Home Depot like Chad used to. Can't remember his last name, but how have those changed?
I get asked that all the time, and the short answer is that we created sports science and interdisciplinary practice from the ground floor, and we tried to push that on leadership at Utah. And here at Louisville, it's the leadership pushing that down on us. And so I'd say, the best case scenarios is that the leadership's pushing down, and then the ground floor is pushing up on leadership for the same things. That has yet to be seen anywhere I've been, but those are probably the biggest differences. To Bo's point, I fully agree on what you said, though, Bo. Like, one thing that's common between University of Utah, University of Louisville, is that in the training and conditioning of athletes, everyone just thinks it's strength and power, and that's all that it is. We have some coaches who think otherwise, who think it is conditioning, but in our American strength conditioning system, we're heavily biased toward strength development, power development, speed development, but the energy system development is kind of an afterthought. When that was a big thing for me. I mean, we were doing more analysis, we were drawing bloods, we were doing all kinds of things on the exercise physiology side of the house when I was at US Ski, and I learned a lot about it. Learning about energy systems for the different sports, and then developing different types of tests to be able to evaluate what's happening inside athletes' bodies from a physiological standpoint. So if that might have been carbon monoxide rebreathing for the endurance athletes to get an indicator of hemoglobin mass, which is an indicator of aerobic capacity, to evaluating buffer capacity of our alpine skiers, and then drawing bloods with point of care technology to be able to get different blood markers literally at the end of ski runs, testing how different types of supplements might affect buffer capacity, and then doing very controlled supplement trials with athletes. When I was at the US Ski Team, I got to go to the pharmacy and buy my own gel caps, and we got to pack our own supplements to the athletes' body weights, and these were all legal, above table. So we would give the samples to USADA and everyone else who came knocking. But that's what we were doing, and then we would test that with the athletes. We would assess in the real life setting, find out what's going on, and learn so much. And then with the off-season training programs, from a strength conditioning standpoint, I mean, the strength development, the speed development, power development, I would say that was 25% of their strength conditioning program, whereas probably 60 to 75% of it was on energy system development for those athletes. And that was pretty much across the board. When you walk into like a college weight room, regardless of the type of sport an athlete plays, it's the opposite, 75%. And in some cases, you could call it 85, 90% of the time spent in strength conditioning is with barbells, speed development, power development, and 5, 10, 15% of those programs are energy system development. It's really, really fascinating to me. So I'm right with you there, Bo, on that topic, as far as energy system development goes, because that was probably one of the biggest observations I made in transitioning from kind of that elite athlete environment back into college sport. So I might throw it over to you real quick, Ted. And on the topic of energy system development, you get to interact with a lot of different NFL teams, and you get to collaborate on a lot of different topics across the sports sciences. So during the off seasons in the NFL, when you interact with teams, like how often do you come across programs who are really interested in that side of training and development, like building the capacity of their athletes to do work, the energy system development side of things?
I think in the NFL, it's sort of interesting because the way with the collective bargaining agreement, their off season is 9 weeks. And so and that is all broken down. So the first 2 weeks, it's just the players and the strength coach. And then it's the strength coach, players, and their position coach. So the problem with that model is there's probably 9 weeks where they needed a buildup of fine-tuning some of those energy systems that the strength coaches really don't get time for, because they literally have to get them ready for OTAs. So a lot of that decision-making in terms of energy system development is usually going on between the player and whoever they're training with in that off season. So I would say if you went back 20 years ago, and I had a real good discussion with Steve Watterson, and he goes, I had, 16 weeks to prepare guys, properly to get them ready for, OTAs and the start of the season. And I think with the new CBA, that has not afforded, I think, the players to getting the best adaptations possible. Now, I think since this is an Olympic year and this is for everybody besides me, you have certain athletes, say in track and field, that are foreign athletes that are going to be competing in the Olympics. How much communication are you having between your coaches and, say, their national coach in terms of getting that athlete, ready for the Olympic trials as well as the Olympic Games?
Well, I'm sure several can chip in on this, but the nice thing about international track and field is it does work pretty hand in hand with each other. So different collegiate qualifiers can actually make you eligible for certain junior, national, junior, international qualifiers. So if played correctly and if they are cross-pollinating correctly, there can be a nice periodized stepping stone approach into not only qualifying someone for an Olympic Games, but preparing them for it. We find more oftentimes than not, a lot of the countries, especially if they're coming from some of those underfunded countries, they'll actually rely on us to help better prepare their athletes to go and represent them at the Olympic Games. We definitely have a coaching staff here that's highly regarded in that world, and they've got some good relationships with those international coaches. Here recently, I haven't heard of too many headaches in terms of trying to coordinate with those international coaches on at least what meets those athletes we're going to go to, how they're prioritizing those meets, and how they're trying to, peak certain performances depending on when those qualifiers are happening. I know it's not always that easy. When I was at the University of Michigan, we had some run-ins with some international coaches that there's just a difference of strategy, a difference of opinion on what meets they wanted to be prioritized and which ones were not. And, when you got a collegiate coach saying, hey, this is our conference championship, that's a priority for us. You have an international coach saying, no, he needs to train through this. That's not the priority. then yeah, you're going to get a little bit of a clash of heads. But then outside of that, I think, I find quite often that they're actually kind of relying on us to better prep their, most of the time their athletes have better resources when they come to a place like this, in terms of meals and recovery options. Not always. It can be a worse scenario too, I can imagine. But I think if you're really trying to uphold some high ethics around an athlete-centered model, that you're at least taking into account what the athlete's aspiring to do and really trying to do your best to assist them with guiding through all that. Not necessarily deprioritizing one or the other, college athletics or their country's ambitions, but really trying to cater to what the athlete is trying to accomplish, with obviously some insights from the coaching staff, and just really trying to be a balanced helper there when we kind of get caught in the middle from time to time. But before the conversation goes too far, I got to ask Dr. Ted, where does the best chili in the world come from?
Oh, it's without question, it's Cincinnati. Now it's different than Texas style chili, but yeah, I would say it's got to be Cincinnati.
The last time that I had some chili from the Midwest too, I didn't get the heartburn that you get down here in Texas. I mean, Texas, it's good going down, but you're going to pay for it later on.
Yeah, for like a week.
Yeah.
At least 24 hours you're paying for that sucker. At least that's my experience.
Where's the dietitian when we need them to tell us why that is?
Ernie,
Well, I think we could probably figure it out with just
Yeah, we
common
don't-
sense, but by God, I'm not going to listen anyways.
Yeah, we don't need logic for these types of topics.
I've got a question. I appreciate that, because even up here, because I'm only an hour away from Cincinnati, and there's an argument about which Cincinnati chili is the best, and I appreciate it. Ted could have really taken us to school if you start talking about, is it Skyline? Is it Versus? So Ted didn't do that. So, but I think when you all are here, if you're in the area, we definitely have to hit it up. Bring your antacids and whatever else you need, Beano, whatever else you need. I've got a question. This is something that I find myself being challenged with, I think, on a daily basis, several times a day. And it's based around that there's a disconnect between a few people and groups of people, whether that's professional, college, and I've got three groups of people where there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect between the people on the front lines, those people, and the people that are in charge, and then coaches. And you have people on the front lines who know they're competent, and then you have those who aren't. Then you have people that are in charge, the leaders. You have some that know what's going on in terms of like this idea of comprehensive integration and how health and performance and high performance and your sports science and nutrition, strength conditioning, and how all of these areas can work together and help. You got the people in charge, that the group that knows, and then some that don't know. And then you have coaches. You have coaches that know how to integrate, bring their strength coach, their sports scientist, their dietitian, like, hey, I know how to use all of these areas. I know how to empower them. I know how to I know how to be educated by them. I know how to even educate them so they know about our sport. And so you have coaches that know and don't know. I think every day I'm challenged with people that are on the front lines that know and don't know working together, coaches that know and don't know, along with the leadership, whether it's professional organization or on a college campus in the athletics department, that know and don't know. And I just keep asking, the one thing Bryan Mann always said is we need to ask questions, find answers to those questions, and ask better questions. So I'm throwing that out to the group, because if you can help answer that, I think for the next 10 years, we'll just give everybody the blueprint.
Man, it matters where they are in the Dunning-Kruger, Mount Stupid continuum. So you got to know how to approach them. You know what I mean? I think that's the number one part of it. And in case, did you guys go over Dunning-Kruger on this podcast at all before? I mean, just in case it's new to anybody, the Dunning-Kruger effect is essentially like, I explain it as, whenever I was 18, I knew everything about strength and conditioning. When I was 22, coming to intern for you back in, I guess I was 24. When I came in, whatever year that was, I can't remember right now. I don't have that many fingers and toes to be able to count that back that far. But I thought I knew everything about strength and conditioning because my confidence was super high because my experience was so low. I didn't know all the different aspects that could be met. So if you meet somebody who has no experience but high confidence, they just don't understand anything yet. And it doesn't matter how you approach them if it's information of a study and all these other things. So it doesn't even matter if you're asking them better questions, but if you know where they're at, then you have a better idea how to approach them. It's kind of like with the sport coach, how sometimes you just have to make it their idea, right? Like going in with Coach Pinkel and the clean stuff and how it went to velocity. It was like, oh, okay, well, maybe if we could just, how you got Coach Pinkel to think like, oh, they just need to move it faster and then they're going to be a better, and then it's going to have a better transfer. Yeah, no, that sounds like a great idea. Whenever we were pushing for that so that we could get tendos on there, so then our cleans, we had some objective feedback to hand it back to the athletes, and there's no more guys standing up with a clean at 0.6 meters per second. It becomes 1.25 and above, or it doesn't count. So since we approached him with where he was at within that Dunning-Kruger, and I'm not saying Coach Pinkel is dumb or anything like that. He's a Hall of Fame coach. He's brilliant. But we approached him with where he was on that continuum. So you just kind of have to realize where the different people are and how to approach them with that. If it's somebody who's all far onto the right, where they're coming back up that experience and wisdom to guru status, that's a completely different thing. It's like, hey, just send this over to Ernie. It's like, hey, Ernie, I want your thoughts on this paper. And then that's all that I've got to do because I know where he's at on that. But now if it's maybe somebody else within the department who doesn't believe in that fiber types change in my own academic department, who doesn't believe that fiber types change as a result of training, well, that might be a little bit of Dunning-Kruger, and I still don't really see how that could happen at this point in time. Being in what year is this? 24, that we would still have that issue. I've got to approach him in a different area because while he is extremely intelligent and he knows all the research pre-1980, we've got to go ahead and approach this in a different manner to try and facilitate that change. So it's really, it's like what you've always taught me is meet them where they are. Well, it's not just meeting them where they are in terms of their professional status, but having done the background on this individual to know how they think so that we know how we should approach this. Do I need to make this your idea? Can I just give you information? Do I have to make this a collaborative effort? Or do I just have to face facts that if I'm talking to you, it is like I am yelling into the wind and nothing is going to get through. So I'm going to have to find somebody else to approach because it may just be me approaching you that puts up a wall. Yeah, there isn't. I wish there was one good answer for that, but the fact that, and you know what, maybe there is, and it's going to take somebody far smarter than our collective here to figure that out. Of course, I see Scott back there smiling. He's probably already got the answer figured out, and he's just sitting on it, waiting to tell me here in 10 years. But I don't know if there is going to be an answer to that because so many people know that they're an expert because they don't know anything. I just gave an example today of this high school strength coach that was, booming on social media, how he was, it's so great that his average speed increase for each year is 2%. And you look at the colleges and they don't have that sort of increase. It's like, well, listen here, dude. last time I checked, last time I looked, I think Mother Nature's increase was 3% a year. So you're getting 2%. So what you're telling me is you're doing worse than if you didn't do anything at all. Okay, for one. And then for two, you got to understand the product of mass times velocity is momentum. So while they might not have increased their speed at all, momentum actually increased significantly. So, there's things like that. So it's, I walk the fine line, and I'm sometimes, Pat, and I don't always say that this is a good idea, but sometimes the best way to do it is to slap somebody in the face with a 2x6 to make them realize that they're dumb. That doesn't always work too terribly well either, because that I have screwed that. You've had to go behind me and fix that one, like with Cool that one day when he was blowing up on Zoe about something, and I lost my temper and just put a little bit of math to it. And I've given that example before, but unless you got somebody like Pat who can come behind you and cool everybody off after the fact, I wouldn't recommend just doing the, hey, listen here, dumbass. I wouldn't do that one. But sometimes I think that might be the only tact you can take. I'm going to pause now.
I mean, Pat, I think you unwrapped a lot with that question, but one simple contextual thing I think too boils back down to people. I mean, you mentioned those who know and then those who utilize. So you have coaches that know, and maybe they know how to intertwine all those pieces, but there's other coaches out there that don't know. They just have a willingness to want to utilize all those pieces. And so I think if you've got a little bit of both, you have a willingness to want to utilize the expertise of a Dr. Mann or a Dr. Reimer, or you have maybe someone that truly has the wherewithal on how to use a Dr. Mann, understanding that and kind of at least using that as a starting point. We have some that may be really familiar with the dietetic side because maybe they went through some sort of dietetic intervention when they were a former athlete, and that's a strong suit, but they might be weaker on the analytical side or on the training side with the strength coach. So I think kind of someone mentioned earlier about meeting them where they're at, that part of that. And then just having personnel that has a willingness to say, we're going to figure out how to bond this relationship. We're going to figure out how to get this to be sort of an institutional mantra of we do strength and conditioning here. We do sports science here. We do applied dietetics here. We do heavy analytics after our diagnostics here. Beyond just, did times go down? Did weights go up? So I think it's just a willingness to want to dive into that. When it comes to this day and age and coaches too, part of that, it's not only to better empower our practitioners so we can do a better job at our expertise, but the other side is the misinformation train is massive right now. I mean, they can get a hold of bad information in 7 million different directions. And that is part of the task as well. If we're engaging, if we have a willingness and we're engaging in these processes with our coaches and pursuing them, then what we're doing is also avoiding them grabbing a hold of potentially bad information and employing that before we ever have a chance to develop a strategy. I encounter quite a few conversations with head coaches that, hey, I got this idea. Oh yeah, where'd you get that from? And over the weekend, I saw it on an IG clip. Or over the weekend, I read this article in this magazine. And not to say just, again, like Bryan said, no, dumbass, don't get your information from there. It's more of, let's talk about it. Let's figure out, and maybe it might not be an opportunity for you to highlight a process that you actually do better with their team already. They're just a little unaware. Maybe they're not in the fold that deep yet. But I think it still boils back to, you got to have a willingness, as much of a ball ache as that sounds like from time to time, to try to help educate a coach, most of the time a very well-paid coach, on something that you kind of live day to day. I think that's worth it. If you're truly trying to put an athlete's performance at the center of your philosophical spectrum.
I want to jump in on that and come back to one thing that I learned the hard way. Because I came with all this stuff, is that sometimes it's that you aren't speaking the same language, and you have to realize that. Because I remember one time with, this was a headache for Pat. I'll leave the cross country coach's name out of it, but he'd been a headache for everybody, and he was being a headache for me. And then he had asked me at the end of like November, December. He's like, "Hey, for this next block, when we get back in January, I don't want to develop a program for strength speed." Well, dude, I learned under Louis Simmons. That's strength speed. That's my game. VBT. That's my game. So I went and I developed this program for it, and I am proud of it. And I send it to him. And I don't know if Pat got an email about this or not, but I ended up getting called into a meeting with Wilmus and messed that one up. And the head track coach at the time, and then the throws coach. And the throws coach, or the head track coach, is like, "Hey, blah blah blah, yada yada yada." And then he brings in Brett, and he goes, "Hey, Brett, you asked Bryan for a program for strength speed, did you not?" And he goes, "Yeah, I did, but that." And then he shushes him for a second, and he goes, "Hold on. Whenever you say strength speed, is this what you meant?" And I can't remember all the things that Brett had mentioned to him, because it turns out that he was actually a distance and middle distance runner in college, so he was very, very well versed with these sorts of things. And then he's like, "Yeah, no, that's exactly what I wrote, or that's exactly what I wanted." And he wrote this crap right here. And then he goes, "Look, sir, what you asked for, is actually called strength endurance. And this is what you had wanted. He actually gave you the exact program that you asked for with strength speed. So we need to make sure that we're speaking the same language." And from that moment on, I was no longer allowed to by Coach McGuire's wherewithal. I was no longer allowed to meet with this guy one-on-one, right? It always had to be with a translator, a halter in there, so that we would be speaking the same language. And how many other times do we see this going on with athletic training as well? That I still remember one day for us, whenever we were talking about, we were doing our shoulder mobility stuff and talking about shoulder traction. Well, we were just trying to create a little bit of joint space in there. Well, if we look at the physical therapy and athletic training world, we're actually trying to do distraction to create the space, rather than actually pull that sucker all the way out of joint. So if a physical therapist, would have heard, actually, I don't remember how it came about, but somebody was like, "Oh, traction, you guys are doing traction? Wait, what?" And then whenever we explained it, they're like, oh, okay. So they had this red light go off, but they had the wherewithal to talk to us about it, to realize that, oh, we actually meant this other thing. So I think the onus has got to be on us too, to make sure that we're speaking the same language. An example that I use, I think I used this one at coaches conference, is this, if you went up to a group of, do you guys speak Spanish?
Muy poquito.
Muy poquito. Ted, ¿se habla español?
No.
No, I'm pretty sure about Pat. I already know the answer for that. So if we went up to a group, let's say that I go down into the lobby, and I hear a bunch of people speaking of éxito, and I keep hearing that word over and over again. As a true gringo, what am I probably going to be looking for?
The exit.
The exit, right? And while we're looking for the exit, they're trying to find success, because that's éxitos. Literal translation is success. So we have to make sure that we're speaking the same language. And so many people are like, well, they need to learn this, they need to learn that, they need to learn. No, dude. You got to realize something. Exercise physiology started in like 1964 with the ACSM due to Charles Tipton. The NSCA it was founded July 29th, 1978. 1 year to the day before my birthday. I'm normally not that good with those sorts of landmarks. I struggle to remember my own anniversary. And so, we've got to just make sure that the onus is on us to make sure that we're using the right terms with all these other places. We can't expect them to cater to us. Okay? Whenever we expect them to cater to us, you get yourself fired. So we need to make sure that we're learning the appropriate languages and using the right terms with our sport coaches, with those within sports medicine, et cetera. So, sometimes it's just a language issue. Then we have to learn just to speak appropriately and, be that chameleon to where you can speak in many different places. Pat would tell you there's Dr. Mann, Coach Mann, Bryan Mann, and B Mann. And whenever B comes out, you better watch the F out because bars are going to get bent or somebody's head's rolling. So, we've got each person's got to be able to do that. They've got to be malleable. Coach Mann doesn't come out too many times with the students. When the technology isn't working, Scott has heard probably stories from Drew thus far. They've installed some software incorrectly on my computer, and Coach Mann has nearly come out twice in labs because the stuff's not working. But, those students, they're not going to see that side, right, of me. And the administrators are hopefully just going to be seeing Dr. Mann or potentially Bryan Mann. They're not going to see Coach or B ever come out. So you've got to make sure that you are the right person at the right time for those communications as well.
Ernie, got a question for you.
Hit me.
We sit here about talking the same language. How much of that is influenced by the actual student athletes themselves?
I mean, I'm constantly trying to learn the lingo of the student athletes, but I think that when it comes to a specific sport, there's probably two people who speak the same language quite well, and that would be the student athlete and their coach. And a lot of times the strength and conditioning coach, the dietitian, the sports scientist, often we have to be around that sport, listening to that coach those athletes enough to start to learn their language. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I remember when I was watching recruiting video with college football coaching staff, and they started using the word twitchy a lot. And that was kind of new. And I've been working with these guys, and now that everyone's saying twitchy, and I'm like, okay, like what actually do they mean by twitchy? And so I'm watching it, they watch video, and they're like, yeah, that guy's really twitchy. And I'm trying to like understand what that actually means in science. And it's probably like someone who's extremely agile, but also has really high muscle power to be able to exhibit, rapid change of directions, responses, and then really just explode spontaneously, right? But you have to be around them. You have to be listening to them, watching video, listening to coach to learn that language. But I want to come back to something, and in part 2 of this episode, Bryan, I'm dying to ask you about some of the research you've done and maybe what that you're doing, because you've got like a lot of great research in great areas. But first, I want to come back to what we were talking about before. In my experience, sometimes like in the positions that we're in, like Bryan, you mentioned like the Dunning-Kruger effect. And sometimes I think of the idea of like unconscious incompetence.
Yeah.
Conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and then unconscious competence. And I started thinking about that. In my experience, sometimes you're scratching your head going like, where are the people on the topic at hand that you're discussing with them? Like, where are they in that continuum? And sometimes what I find is that the coaches are probably the most open to things that can benefit their athletes. They're open to it, even if they know they don't know anything about it. Because in my experience, coaches are like, whatever we got to do to help our kids be successful, then let's figure out how to get that done. Where I find barriers a lot of times is actually with the immediate boots on the ground colleagues, like the health and performance staff. That's where I actually find barriers. The coach is like, I want to do whatever's possible. Like it's got to fit within our constraints. And if we change one thing, we got to, modify another. But let's figure this out. And then where it fails is in the communication, the collaboration with the health and performance staff. A lot of times because, hey, this is how we do things. So we don't have room for that. So my question for you, Scott, would be, I believe you've been at A&M the longest, and now you've been able to work with Bo for about 2 years now. And, Bo, I think the first time I met Bo was when he was still at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, I believe, was the first time I first met you. And then, you know, we exchanged a bit when you were at Michigan. And then B Man, like your name, like before you were B Man, I knew who you were because of the guys at the Indianapolis Colts. They told me about some of the research you were doing. But so, Scott, you got like B Man's here now, Bo's here, and you're the guy who's been there for a long time, right? You got ways you do things.
For sure.
So in what ways have these two really, really stretched you since they've been there? I mean, just maybe 6 months with B Man, 2 years with Bo, but you've
For
been there
sure.
for years,
Yeah.
doing things the way you always have. So how have these guys really stretched you and maybe gotten you out of your comfort zone and made you feel vulnerable, but in a good way?
They've been great because they bring ideas / their backgrounds here to where it's not like we're even searching for anything new with them. I think just utilizing their previous experience at their places. And I know one of the first things Bo talked about bringing here to A&M was like work capacity, energy system development. I remember one of our first conversations was about assessments. And again, all that they were doing at the PI, how did they do it? What were they doing? Just because, again, we were still kind of developing that when it comes to what we're doing in our athletes with the resources we have, with the different locations we have. So I remember going to his office and I think we scheduled just 30 minutes. Hey, I'm going to listen. What did y'all do? How did we do it? Turned into, I think, an hour and a half. Because again, we went down some tangents with men's golf, just because that's one of the sports we work with, which is great. But just, and again, it wasn't something that he had to go research or anything like that. He just knew it because, again, he's a great practitioner, bringing that experience with him. Dr. Mann's been, wonderful because he's in here lifting at least 3 times a week. Or I don't know why he picked our office to be the office where he sets his stuff down. But I literally have a sticky note on my computer, Dr. Mann project ideas, and I'll write it down. Hey, I need to go look at this metric when it comes to force plate testing. I need to go look at catapult and why that number means that number. We did some stuff with soccer where we're combining some different assessments to see like injury risk, all this kind of thing. So, and again, it's not something that they have to go research, oh, this new topic or this new assessment, this new way to analyze. That's just like practical experience right there. So again, I think we're still very, very new to it, to where we're going to go a little deeper here, hopefully shortly, of like, hey, let's collect all that we're doing right now. Because again, we are very blessed here, and then we have a lot of resources. We have a lot of technology that we are collecting a lot of information, but are we utilizing it as well as we can? We can always get better. But again, just having a little different idea from Dr. Mann, because again, he is a little off and like he can see from the top down. Where I'm in the day-to-day, I just need to make sure the force plates are working today. I need to make sure the athletes are here on time and they're getting in. Great. Now I got to go to soccer and make sure they're doing this, this, this. He gets to talk about the fun ideas. And again, now it's okay. Can we get, instead of being reactive, which we're going to have to be retrospective, I mean, on some of the data we have, because again, we have a lot of good data and then we have managed it very, very well to where if someone asked me, hey, let's go look at spring 2019 catapult soccer data, can we do it? I would be able to do it in a heartbeat. But now it's twisting that and be like, all right, how can we be proactive with some of the things that, hey, maybe Dr. Mann sees something that if we just do maybe this one more assessment, or maybe we do the assessment slightly different, we could do this comparison with some of our workload or anything like that. So I think that's the exciting part of, we're already doing some really, really good stuff, but I think we can take the next step if we all bring our brains together and we proactively plan some of that.
Now this is for, since everybody's at the collegiate level, how much assessments are you allowed to do with prospective student athletes that come on campus for an official or unofficial visit?
That's a big compliance no-no right there, I think.
Yeah, unfortunately, you can't really, because you can't.
How about if they're there for a camp?
When athletes are there for camps, it's there could be different scenarios where they're having different competitions and things like that, and you might get a sense for someone's capabilities in that setting.
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky one. You have coaches, right? They get really energetic about recruiting this kid who's supposed to be the next thing, and their stats say so, and they have done well in the competitive arenas that they've encountered. But those stat sheets don't talk about their surgery history or their concussion history or um, maybe the lack of cognitive functions or whatever. Yeah, that's a tricky one. We unpackage some not so pleasant gifts sometimes when they finally get here, especially when there's an expectation of them being a high achiever, only to unpackage it and figure out that you bought a lemon. That it happens for sure.
I think a lot of it depends on the sport, and the NCAA does have rules. I remember that, yeah, was it like 2005, 2006, somewhere around in there, where we were doing. Wow, shoot, I just remember what we were doing, man. We had to throw in the jump mats. We had to bring tons of stopwatches and tons of people because we were timing 40s and pro agility test and vertical jump and standing long jump and all that. And then I know that the rules have changed since then. And like you had to be able to teach something, to be able to test something within a camp and things like that. So what the current rules and limitations are, I'm not 100% certain, Ted. But I do know that if one of these coaches will let me know what tests are being done in certain camps, I got some stuff that I've been cooking up in the back burner since about 2005, and been playing with some things that can help with some talent identification. So this is one of those where the rubber meets the road type thing. Scott isn't going to have time to go back and research all of this stuff, but guess what? I feel like Ricky Bobby. I do what I want. So it's so I get to look at these sorts of things, and with the way that we did some things at Mizzou while I was a young pup and knew everything. I thought it was stupid the way that we did it, but now, because not the way that Pat did it, I'm saying the way that Coach Pinkel wanted it done. And now looking back at it, I'm like, you know what? It might not have been the best thing for us as a staff with the way, workflows and stuff like that. But holy cow. I mean, the amount of information that we've pulled from that, you look at like the smallest worthwhile change for sprints and change direction tests. We were able to publish that sort of data because of how that was collected. And we know such a plethora of information now for the field because of the way that stuff was done. So at the end of the day, Ted, is I'm not sure, but if Scott can get me, or Bo, or I don't care who it is, gets me a list of the camps and how they are testing the campers, if they're testing the campers, I'll get them tons more information on there that will help them to make a better decision on who to recruit. I used to do that with the soccer team at Mizzou, and some of it was, we weren't actually collecting the data, but it was just sort of, hey, see this person over here? They move really well, and they're big, and they're just as fast as everybody else. If you can teach her how to play soccer, she's going to be a good player. And we ended up, extending scholarships to that individual. So, I mean, there isn't testing that I'm aware of. Some of it could just be the eyeball test from somebody who's got a little bit of training. But some of it is absolutely, you give me some numbers and I'll have a nerd party over here, and we'll see what we can't do and see if we can uncover a hidden gem there. Because I guarantee you there are some of them.
If you are having a nerd party, something I would like to talk about at that nerd party would be, how do you evaluate your systems, and its effectiveness? Not evaluating a test or an exercise, but your system as a whole. Are you all there yet? Are you able to, have you implemented anything? And is it holistic? Is it, you know, coaches, athletes, staff? Where are you all with that?
I'm not there yet. I don't have an IRB that would allow me to look at anything like that. So I'll help them and do various aspects. Right now, we're being hamstrung by my inability to get this done, and you know, just dude, how many new classes? So I teach 4 classes a semester. 6 or 7 of them are new right now. So I'm basically bent over the barrel, just trying to hold on to that. CASC accreditation as well. And then just the stuff for being a new faculty member. Oh my God, this thing called F180. I'll tell you what I think that F must stand for in the F180. But you know, I'm not. I don't know what the rating is on this, and I don't know if I said it, if the dean would still allow me to be a professor here after that. But we're not, at least from my standpoint, we're not there yet. Scott has been here for a while, and I know that he's done an amazing job, and I don't know. But from my standpoint, I am not there yet. I shouldn't say we. I am not there yet.
I'm going to steal it before Bo says it because I know he's going to say it, but the evaluation process is daily. It's not something you do at a beginning of the semester, end of the semester. Hey, did you do your job well? I know within sports science, again, a culture of curiosity is really important to us. So where, how can we be as efficient as possible in what we're doing and all the different systems we have? Can we save 10 minutes with a different way we either analyze or manage a data system to where we can spend that 10 minutes either going deeper in analysis or 10 minutes talking to a coach about the analysis to where it's going to be more impactful. So I think that is a daily thing. And again, you're not going to be able to make changes to any of your systems daily, but making notes of like, hey, I need to change the way I manage that system for that time at the end of the semester. Or maybe I need to change the way this report looks because it's not making the impact that I thought it would with its coaching staff. So I think when it comes to evaluating, that's an everyday kind of process.
I'm
How
not
do you,
muted on that one.
in terms of evaluation, let's just say that if you look at the training adaptations from your athletes for this particular team were just outstanding. But then yet that team does not have a good season. You know, when you do an analysis, you're going, well, the training appeared to be good. Then you've got 2 options. Maybe we just didn't have as many skilled athletes as we thought, or the coaching was subpar. But you really can't bring that to the table. But if you encountered those situations before.
For sure. It's so hard to make true correlations with wins and losses. Again, some people have done it and that's great, but like it's hard because there's so many factors that go into that. So where, again, the successful teams here that I've worked with are more like, can we evaluate the process to get there? And again, it starts with one of our coaches. We work on like, hey, is the targeted practice the way we expect it to be? Or is the actual practice that we conducted close to what we estimated it before the practice? So again, we'll work on, hey, what's the targeted RP for that day? What's the targeted duration? We'll go back at the end of the week and be like, hey, did we accomplish what we were planning? And again, on game day, when you're going up against the #1 team in the nation in volleyball and we're just not there yet, yeah, we can do everything perfect and it not work. Because again, so many factors go into it. Or we can do everything terrible and we still pull out a win. That happens too. So I think if you control what you can control, that's the best way to like look at it. Because again, we control what practice looks like from a workload standpoint. If that's what we feel as a staff is going to make them better for the competition, then that's what we have to look at. Because again, there's so many factors that go into wins and losses that it's something to look at, but I'd rather look at the things we control better.
Yeah, I would definitely echo some of that. And the other part too is not all of it is just an assessment of did our strategies improve physiology or did our strategies improve a skill set? It's actually evaluating the strategy. Do we have a winning strategy and getting into deeper conversations with coaches on that? just because we may do something unorthodox in training, it could be a very intentional strategy to how we choose to prepare for the sport. And that's the beauty behind sport. I'm going to take my strategy and I'm going to stack it up over here. You take yours and you stack it up over there. We're going to meet each other in the middle and we're going to see whose strategy prevails. So being able to evaluate the strategy, not only minute by minute, as Scott mentioned, but annually, and then over long-term periods of time. To me, when you truly have a system that is thorough and successful, it's sustainable. And by sustainable, I don't just mean you win exactly the same every year. I mean, you're continuing to evolve with personnel. I mean, it's very common nowadays. The cast changes constantly. The coaching cast, the player cast, like the whole, it's a different movie every time we play it, because the transfer portals and coaches hopping jobs and people getting fired left and right and buying out contracts. And, there's a lot of moving parts to that. But if I'm truly evaluating a system, regardless of those little rolling variables, in a long-term approach, there should be some sustainability of success if it's headed in the right direction. But I actually kind of like the fact that we got many different coaches that choose a different pathway in terms of strategy. It challenges the practitioner. Can we come up with supportive initiatives to make this strategy prevail? Or it challenges us. Hey, do we need to have a serious conversation? Is this a realistic strategy? Do you really mean to go in to a competitive venue and win with this? And so those are real life conversations. To me, that's what makes sport fun.
Ted, I'm going to take a little bit different tact on this because, of course, I look at things a little bit differently. And because like I said, I do what I want. One of the things that is what I really like doing, I started doing this back at Miami. I started to try and do it at Missouri. I just didn't have enough time there before the wheels fell off, so to speak. Is what are the underpinnings of success, right? So one of the things that I'm trying to do is, stratify the team, of course, by positional characteristics, and then by, is this person good or not? Now, my thought is success leaves clues. So if everybody that's successful looks one certain way, then maybe that is something that is important in terms of performance. The best example that I could possibly give, I think, comes from back at my time in Miami, where I was working with, it was Brian Gabriel was the strength coach at the time for the baseball team. Now, I had some previous success with baseball. At Southwest Missouri, we went to the College World Series. We had a bunch of big, strong dudes on there. I guess you could say our weightlifting team had a baseball problem. And then at Missouri, we had some success under Birdman and Caton under Coach Jameson with guys like Max Scherzer, big, strong dude. All these guys that we were putting out were these really strong guys that were super successful. So, of course, from my personal bias of being a power lifter, wrote the book Powerlifting, for Christ's sake. All these people are like, Bryan Mann, it's against strength. Google me on YouTube or whatever it is. Look me up on YouTube. There's lifts of me, videos of me hitting big lifts. I love strength. It's not that I think strength is stupid, but we did that force velocity profile. And, you're supposed to go through and normalize the data and everything. And I happened to see on the velocity end of the spectrum, there was these like 4 lines way up at the top. And I'm getting ready to go delete them just so I would have a normal thing and I wouldn't have to log transform or nothing like that. Because who wants to do that? And I was like, oh, wait a second. Who are these 4 guys? Oh, All-American, newcomer person to watch for the entire, what conference was that? ACC, and freaking first team all ACC from the last year. And they were at the velocity end of the spectrum is where their deviation had occurred. So all this type thing, and whenever I looked at the force end of the spectrum, there were no differentiations between level of player. So then it just made me step back and think, what's actually important here for baseball? Well, how many times do they have to overcome a massive external load? Do they have to fight for position anywhere? Like, in the paint in basketball? No. It's not a line of scrimmage they have to overcome. They got to overcome a 5-ounce baseball and a 32-ounce bat. So it wasn't the load end of the spectrum where there was a talent differentiation. It was at the velocity end of the spectrum. So if we could just take our data and start examining it critically, I think that we will start being in a much greater position, especially with how technology has improved and reduced the cost of so much stuff. I mean, shoot, linear position transducers research grade used to be $15,000. Now a GymAware has got an R squared of about 0.97 with Vicon, and it's 20. I have no idea how much they cost. Right, I'm about ready to spout it out, but I'm going to say something stupid. Hey, force plates, they used to cost $25,000 each. If somebody's below 6'6", you can get a ton of information on that single axis force plate for counter movement jumps and mid thigh pulls. You know, I don't know what the different force dex plates cost, but I just got a quote on some Hawkins plates for like $7,000. Yeah, you got annual subscriptions too. So, you know, that was $50,000 down to $7,000. So I think with how technology has improved and decreased in cost, if we would just simply apply some of the scientific method to it to find out what are the variables that matter. And then we're also not going to be able just to do the simple correlation analysis. We're going to have to look at, did the changes in those variables that we thought were key, did they elicit changes in performance as well? It's going to be easier for some sports than it will be others. For instance, baseball, softball, and golf. They're all looking at exit velocity, club head speed, or bat velocity, or pitch velocity. So that's going to be pretty easy. Now, it's going to be harder whenever we start looking at sports like, I don't know, wrestling, football, basketball, you know, where there's all these different motor patterns and things that are involved for success. But I think that just simply being able to stratify and realize that, hey, a soccer player isn't a soccer player. People are on the wing for a reason. People are a center mid or outside mid or center back or outside back for a reason. And let's see what makes them that position. And then let's see how we can enhance performance as a result of those examinations. So yeah, sorry for the soapbox there, but that's the way that I'm looking at it, you know, and hopefully that can impact wins and losses. It's not going to initially, and then Ted, a little bit further down that point, I think it's from one of the guys. I think it's Aaron Kutz has got a new statistical method where they are using the spread, and you know, did you cover the spread? Did you beat the spread? As a more accurate way of wins and losses. And what I mean by that, a more accurate way, is Scott just said it. It's like, okay, we're going against the #1 team in the country. And maybe we're I have no idea. All right, let's just say we're number 60. All right, we're going to get smoked. Did we beat our expectations of how we were going to get smoked? Well, it's still a loss, but if we are beating and we're decreasing that gap, well, it means that we're at least going in the right direction. Now, at the end of the day, is that going to matter? Well, I mean, you lose enough, the coach is going to get fired anyways. You can't say, well, we were supposed to lose, but we didn't lose by as much. You know, that doesn't carry squat, I'm sure, for an athletic director. But, you know, that's another way that you could use for evaluation. Now, if it's going to be right or not, I don't know. I'm not going to jump on this bandwagon. I did that with magnitude-based inference back in the day, and I learned my lesson. So I'm going to wait until the really smart statisticians come out, because I don't know what rules this violates.
I got a question for a bunch of PhDs and one about to be sitting around. I may or may not be getting some peer pressure to go and chase a PhD, but going through all these layers of being a practitioner, and we all know the stresses that come with that, and then you potentially want to throw some extracurricular studies on top. What advice would you have for an aspiring student, again, I guess, that knowing that some of the daily stresses we got to go through as a coach and a practitioner?
Do you want me to go first or go last? Because I got tons of advice.
I hear yours all the time.
Yeah, get it from somebody else.
Let me jump in there. Let me jump on that one. So I had a chance to, so my wife has a PhD, so I got a chance to see that process a long time ago. And I told her that's like in my exact words, and I was like, that's stupid. That was my exact words. Like the whole process of getting a PhD, I was like, I'll never do that. So obviously I ended up doing that. But I had a chance to watch Bryan go through that process. And it's a stressful process. And there's things that your strengths you're going to have to rely on those, but your weaknesses are going to get exposed. And I think one of the biggest things I learned about the PhD process, it's not about the books or what happens in the classrooms. For me, it was about relationships. Like you better understand the importance of relationships and leaning on those around you, because you're going to need those people. You're going to, whether they're on your committee, whether it's the professors, whether it's the research projects, whether it's the advising committee, you're going to need people. And you're going to need people to have your back too, because you're going to be gone. You're going to be in class. You're going to be teaching. You're going to have people that can step in on your behalf. Even Coach Pinkel, there were times when I had to miss practice, and he said, "Hey, you got a good staff. Josh Stoner is perfectly capable to to step in when you're not there." I had Bryan, "Hey, I don't understand statistics like you do. Help me out. Let's go over to the academic area. Walk me through it." You're going to need these people to, I don't know how to put, Dr. McGuire, I don't know where to put a semicolon. Like, you got to help me out. So you're going to need these people to help you through, because those areas that you may not have paid as much attention to are going to be exposed in this process. And it's about putting a lot of, people start with it like, oh, I want to study this topic. That you don't start like that. You think you will, but that's not how you start. You end up getting there through like this funneling process, but that deciding what you want to research is so far down the road. You're gonna get to that point, but up front, you need people that will allow you to. I had an overlapping class, 2 overlapping statistics classes. Would the professors allow me to take both classes, which sped up my graduation by a year? And because they allowed me to overlap 2 classes. So do you have people that will help you out in that process? Because it made a long day, but it ended up being something that sped up the whole process for me. So that's just a little bit of advice I would have, Bo. And it's something that will challenge you. I remember having some thoughts, dreams, nightmares. Some weird things were happening with my body. I thought I needed surgery 3 different times. That's the ugly side of it. But the good side is you're learning. The good side is you're learning about yourself. And then people get weird once you get your PhD. That's when they really get weird. Oh, I don't have to call you doctor now. Like, I just took some classes and wrote a long paper. Like, really, nothing changes. I just wanted to be able to do my job better and become a better person. But other people get weird when you complete that process. But I'll let Ernie take it, because I know he had a pretty awesome experience. Mine probably scared you.
Man, thank you for that. Nope, that's kind of what I'm anticipating, is nightmares and surgeries. So you just validated my claims here.
I mean, my PhD was interesting. I had my nightmares too. I'm not gonna lie. Like, yes, in the end, I wouldn't take it back for a minute. I wouldn't, if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't like have not done a PhD. So I'm really, really proud that I finished. And I would say that's probably the big thing. Like, the thing that was calling to me when I started it, when I first started telling people I wanted to get a PhD, like, there were people who had PhDs telling me, well, you don't really need one. And I was so offended by that, because it's like, look at you, look at the position and status you're in. You're telling me I don't need one. I was offended, to be honest with you. And so I did it, and I jumped in, and I found a a chair for my PhD who basically just said like, hey, if you pay your own way, you can study whatever you want. You can do this however you want to. And that was really cool. But what I didn't know was that he also has this motto, which I use. And the motto is, I manage by not managing. And I actually manage people like that now. Like, how do you manage your staff? Like, I don't manage them, because if you suck, everyone else is going to let you know. And then we'll talk about how to fix that, right? and so there were some times in my PhD when I wasn't really like putting that much effort into it, and it was other people, not my chair, who told me that I was sucking at the PhD process. And the other part is that just Bo, you seemed like a pretty humble guy, like, and all my experiences with you going back to the beginning tell me that. But you know, you're talking to someone here who was like a high school valedictorian, then 4.0 GPA, then college, my undergrad was a 4.0, then master's degree was 4.0. Like, I've had A's my whole life, right? But there's no perfect research study. So that was like, you know, every time I was trying to put together this perfect study and have all these perfect ideas and have the windshield smashed in by all these really smart people, like, it was a very transformative experience for me to come through that. But the biggest thing for me, I would say, is that, and you're going to get to this point in your PhD when it's going to be crunch time and it's time to finish. And I remember when I finally did it, that the thing that people kept asking me, even people who seemingly don't know a lot about higher education, they just said like, so if you do this, you're going to finish, right? And I remember Chris Hill, Dr. Hill, the AD at Utah, when I was doing this, he's like, you're not going to be one of those ABD guys, are you? And so there were a lot of people, like, their expectation was for me to finish. And that helped me set the expectation, like, I'm going to finish this damn thing. And so if you're going into this and you do it, you're going to get to a point when, like, you got to stop screwing around, and you're going to have to buckle down and write that damn dissertation and go defend it. And that's the hardest part, that final push when you have done everything you're supposed to, you've collected all your data, you've analyzed it, you've got to write it up, maybe do a little bit more. And you got to go from that point to then submitting it and defending it in front of your peers. And just that final push is the hardest part. It's like, it could almost, I don't know how else to describe it, but you go on this like big, long, multi-year journey, and it's all not that hard until the very last part of it. And that's the part where you're going to test yourself. You're going to test your family. You're going to test everyone at work, and you're going to finish. That's the bottom line. So I guess it's my way of saying that you go on this journey. Just know that you're on the journey until you get to the finish line, no matter how long it takes. That's the commitment that I would want you to make, and that's the commitment that I would want anyone out there to make if they're going to pursue a PhD.
I mean, I hear you're going to learn a lot about yourself. I hear you're going to challenge yourself. You're going to challenge your family. The word journey always resonates with me. You put the spin on it too, that almost gave it like a competitive feel, like almost like you're going to get to this point, you know, you reach certain perseverance and competition, and then it's either you're going to buckle down and push through and win the thing, or you're not. That definitely sounds more and more appetizing, but I have my reservations. There's no question. I get gentle nudges of encouragement, some violent, from Dr.
Yeah, Swift
Mann,
kick in the ass. That's what he gets.
among others. But yeah, no, thanks for that. The perspectives help a ton, because I honestly have no idea what I'm getting myself into, but somehow feel energized about it. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, if you do, when you decide, just make sure you're deciding to finish.
Yeah. No.
Just the advice that I've given to him, because the listenership, unfortunately, is not my neighbor. Fortunately or unfortunately, is not my neighbor.
I don't know if you guys know this, but Dr. Mann lives about 10 doors down from me, so I get an earful of this pretty much whenever I don't care to hear it.
which is probably most of the time, and that doesn't stop me, especially after you get a couple of drinks in me. You never know what's going to come out my mouth. Actually, Pat knows what's going to come out my mouth, but nobody else does. Hey, make sure that you're not biting off more than you can chew. That was one of the main mistakes that I had made, that I tried to take on way too many classes and do way too much at the same time. I mean, holy shnikes. Talking about the defense being horrible, man, we had Blaine Gabbert and Alden Smith's pro day, and 6 days later, I did my doctoral defense. You want to talk about stress the F out? Holy cow, that's why this sucker's this Custer's Last Stand is going on. It's probably still from that day. But make it in small chunks. Only do it if you have the appropriate support, whether it be from your family or within your staff and within your professors. Okay, because they have to understand, if you're a strength and conditioning coach, that 60 hours is a short week, man. Their 60 hours might be like the longest that they can ever fathom. And you hear 60 hours and you're like, oh, baby, it's vacation. All right. So realize that you got to probably chunk it up. I wouldn't take more than how many classes you can handle a semester. Usually that would probably be about 2. Okay. That somebody can handle normally. And, going along with what some other people said is, I'll just give it this way. The advice that Coach McGuire gave me. Whenever I started out trying to find this, I was looking at some overtraining stuff, and I was wanting to go that route about how to best and most effectively monitor overtraining in athletes. And he looked at me and he goes, "Hey, Bryan, this is a great idea. And I can see that you want to save the world. Save the world when you're Dr. Bryan. Let's do a dissertation that has you Dr. Bryan that much more quickly. So if it's stuff that you're already doing, that you already know, and that and that's what sets you on fire, that is the topic that you should do your dissertation on. And keep it as simple as freaking possible. Because you know what they call the person with I think it's 85-page dissertation? Doctor. Get it done. That's all it is.
And 85 pages, that's a small dissertation for the.
Yes, it is. Yeah. If somebody didn't know that, yeah.
In case someone didn't know.
Hey, wait, that's the second time you said, oh, wait, hold on. That's a different little comment there.
Hey, before Ted jumps in, Dr. Ted jumps in, the importance of having people around you. Bryan's desk so if you're walking by his office, his desk, you could see a profile view. And usually the hair that he used to have in that area, and I can't talk bad about anyone with hair or no hair, but he used to have hair and it would lay down. But when he was really stressed out, it would be like this. And so you walk past and he's on his computer and his hair is like that. And you knew it's a high period of stress going on right now. Now, I don't know if he actually did that or statically the brain activity made it stand up.
Probably both.
Ted, what advice you got for Bo?
Advice? I think the advice everybody's given has been great. It was, back when I was doing mine, it was back in the horse and buggy days. So, you had to go to the library to do all the research. There was no internet. But I think what Bryan just gave you is the best. Don't bite off more than you can chew. And, be very deliberate. And then my biggest thing is I try to make connections on different subjects with individuals that were a lot smarter than me to use his resources, as Pat alluded to. And I think another positive that came out of it is that I developed very good time management skills. And you can't waste time. And I thought that was a positive that came out of it. But you've got some great people in your corner that have given you great advice today.
Yeah,
Definitely. I not to put pressure on him, but I'm anxious too to hear and thank you guys for all of that. That's insightful. I've been jotting down notes here, but definitely anxious to hear from Scott as he's living it. I mean, he's footsteps away from that finish line. But he's also obviously a highly occupied practitioner on a daily basis. And not just a practitioner, managing a team of upcoming sports scientists. So Scott, I'm dying to hear this.
I'm so glad you asked the question, because I've already written down a few things of, hey, I need to get this done right away. Because again, I think I'm in the thick of it right now, that everyone's talked about, like it's buckle down time. Because again, coursework's done, prelims are done. I got my data. So the advice I do have, again, everyone else's advice is way better because they're done. They're called doctors. Like I told my committee and my chair going in, I'm like, I'm only doing this if it's over stuff that I'm already doing for my job. It's not an extra sidekick kind of thing. It is like the stuff I'm going to write on is the stuff I was doing for work when it comes to our volleyball team. So that was the biggest thing. And again, they'll come to you and be like, well, what if you split the team in half and one gets this supplement and one doesn't? I'm like, that's not how athletics works. And that's not how I'm going to work.
Hey, Scott,
yeah.
I think you got so excited talking about this, you might have knocked your mic and muffled a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
This is big time. I really want everyone to hear this.
Hold on. Can you hear me now?
Not really.
Hold on.
I mean, I can hear you, but it sounds like you're, through something else.
What about now?
That's better.
Let's go.
We're gonna start at the beginning. One, listen to all these other guys because they're doctors. I'm not. I'm in the thick of it. Still, courses are done, which is really, really nice. And again, that was the easy part. Now it's the buckle down part that Ernie talked about. And again, saw him at the coaches conference and he was like, where are you at? Okay, finish it. Because again, I'm at that point. It's very stressful because again, all the data is collected and everything. It's just the writing part. I think Pat brought it up, like you get exposed your weaknesses. I found my weakness when it comes to writing and all that kind of stuff. I'm good with numbers. I like managing and analyzing that. Writing's my weakness right now. So, but again, going into it, I knew I wanted to do something over the work I'm already doing at A&M to where that was the easy part. Like, it's not a side project for me. It's, hey, we're going to present on something that I'm already doing. And again, your chair will come to you and be like, oh, what if you split the team up in half and one gets supplements, one gets this? That's not how athletics works. So, that was the easy part for me. That again, my research hours was basically work. Because again, I was already collecting the data. Now it's all these extra stuff that again, I'm taking research hours, but I got to find time to write. I got to find time to go look into some articles, all that fun stuff. Got to find time to meet with Dr. Mann. That way we can actually go over some of the projects and be like, hey, what do we want to look at? How do you think it's going to be best presented? All that kind of stuff. So that's my steps right now. Very glad you asked that question because again, I've got so much advice from all these great guys. Now I just got to buckle down and get it.
Scott, I'll tell you something that I use because during that time I was writing, I was working with the teams and teaching the mental performance and mental conditioning. I was like, maybe I need to use some of this stuff on my own because I had a lot of anxiety about the writing. You're talking about a huge, it's a huge undertaking. And I remember thinking, well, I've got to get a chapter written, and anxiety would build up like, no, okay, let me break it down a little bit. How many pages is that? He was like, okay, maybe it's 10 pages. I was like, oh, anxiety, let me bring it back down. How about I write 1 page at a time? There were some days I was like, I can do that 1 page at a time. There were some days writing 1 page, I was like, how am I going to do it? I was like, all right, 1 paragraph at a time. Some days the paragraph was too much. It's like thinking about it. How am I going to write a paragraph? It's like 1 sentence at a time. There were days during the process, I'm telling you, I had to go 1 word at a time, 1 word at a time. So just break that thing down. You feel that like it's this huge thing you got to get accomplished. Break it all the way down to the smallest thing you can do at that moment where the anxiety goes away. And then you can say, okay, I can handle this. I got it.
Love it. I'm at bullet points right now. I got so many bullet points, and I'm like, all right, I got a good outline now. Oh, that bullet point. Okay, let's dive deeper. Okay, that's the project it's on my mind today. RP, cool, going that. Next day, it's on another one. All right, I see that bullet point. I need to write some more on it. I love that advice. That's great.
You know, one person I learned a lot, I am learning a lot from on writing. I won't say have learned, I am learning, is our direct colleague here at U of L. That's Dr. Adam Petway. And Adam and I have had the opportunity to publish a few manuscripts together, and we wrote a book chapter together that will be published. And he writes so much differently than me. And when I write, I overanalyze every word I'm trying to write, and maybe I get insecure about what I'm trying to write. Not Adam. Adam he'll just write it, and he'd be like, all right, cool. Hey, I just spit all this down. Let's see what kind of a mess I made. And then we just start editing and moving stuff around and clean it up. And it's great. Like, I've learned so much from Adam, and the way, like, because when we write together, he'll blast out pages of writing, and it's not perfect. It's grammar, there's misspellings, and then we go in and mend. And from working with Adam, I've learned a lot about just being able to do that. Just like get it all down, say what you want to say, and then share it with others and let them clean it up for you until it makes sense.
That's the best thing to ever do. Writing is going with somebody else and being able to sit down, and then you can, man, I struggle writing, and I don't know why, but the best articles that I've ever put out, it's because I could sit there and I could talk with somebody. It was either Steve Sayers or Joe Signorelli, and I'm working on it here, probably Steve Reekman, that they can make my verbal vomit make sense, or make, as Pat and Jana used to call it, beam-and-ease, and translate it into academic English. If you can just have that person to write with and bounce it off of, so then that way you can find the best word, that you guys go back and forth between. It's like a freaking tennis volley match sometimes, and then the magic comes out, and it doesn't even resemble what you were thinking in the first place.
What a question, Bo. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, a lot of my gears are turning. A lot of gratitude on this end. Thanks a ton for all of you. I kind of hijacked the podcast with a personal question there, but thanks a ton for the insights.
It was awesome. I can't say we've ever discussed that question there on this podcast, what it actually takes to be a practitioner, but get a PhD. Because I think, like, everyone in this room, and maybe even Ted, but I know a little bit about where Pat and Bryan, I know where you and Scott are now, and myself. Like, I was a director of sports science, grinding through that final push, and so we were practitioners getting it at the same time, a non-traditional PhD student, and we've never discussed that on the Research Reps Roundtable podcast. So I thank you for asking such an awesome question.
Well, I think it's about time we wrap it up. So Ted, you're the closer.
All right.
Bring us home.
Well, since we've got 3 guests today, they each give us have the opportunity to give us a one book recommendation.
I'll go first. Mine, actually, I'm going to cheat because there's 2. Because if you read the first, there's no way that you cannot read the second. But it is. I may have a copy right here for you. Oh, it may be at home. But anyway, it's The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. His second book is called Scarcity Brain. For those in the coaching world, training world, you deal with anything behavioral where you're trying to alter a behavior, you're trying to understand your own behavior and how you do things. Both of those books will lead you down different rabbit holes of understanding where our behavior comes from, kind of things that we fall to for comfort, and maybe some even intentional discomforts that are necessities that we try to neglect. But they've definitely influenced how I live my daily life and how I instruct how I parent, how I keep myself accountable and even reflect. So yeah, those would be the comfort crisis is the first one, and that'll definitely lead you down the road of reading Scarcity Brain. I highly recommend those two.
Well, since Scott is off camera, I guess I'll go next. Everybody's always expecting me that, I'm going to be bringing out some big training book and everything. And of course, that's where my brain went first. But, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter about science. It matters how you are as a person and how you deal with other people. So I think that I'm going to go old school here and bring up a book that I don't think is recommended anymore by very many people. And that's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. I still, every semester, I will pull stuff from that book. And I don't know how many times I've read it. And matter of fact, I think I need to go back and read it again. But just, basically the principles of being a person, as opposed to, trying to, tweak things, et cetera. Yeah, that's the book that I'll go with.
Bryan, was there a follow-up? Was there a follow-up to that? That was like the 8th.
Yeah. No, there was the 8th habit, and well, shit, I don't know if it's home or if it's here. I'll go look for it while Scott's there, and I'll see. I can't remember what the 8th habit was. Let me go on here.
See, I was off camera because I was trying to find the book. The one I got is more the soft skills kind of side. The Peak Performance by Brad Schulenberg and Steve Magnus. That's one. And then getting into the hard skills one, Monitoring Training and Performance in Athletes by McGrugan was really, really good. That was the one that started me off in my journey when I was younger. And then since then, the Essentials of Sports Science book came out, and that is a great resource, at least for me. And again, reading through it, I was like, oh, I like this. They got really, really good authors for each chapter. So those would be the 3 for me.
Excellent.
Yeah, there was another one. It's called The 8th Habit from Effectiveness to Greatness. Now, you know what? I got it, and I got it back in here's December of 2011, and I haven't read it since then. So I don't remember what that one was about. But there's actually another really good one to recommend for people, Tribal Leadership. It just talks like how people, fall into different categories and how to most effectively communicate with each different person in their state of being.
I have a claim to fame. I got to work with Stephen Covey's grandson for a number of years at Utah. His name is Britt Covey. He's amazing. He's like a video game character. Ended up going to the NFL, and that kid lived those habits to the T. He was amazing.
Dude, that's badass, man.
Yeah, I might throw a book out there since we're talking about PhDs. So I'll say that this book here, called The Fearless Mind, was probably the last book that I read that really solidified like my desire and the belief in myself that I could pursue the PhD and get through it and everything. So it's by Dr. Craig Manning, and he is a CMPC, a certified mental performance coach, who was both a sport coach and a performance psychologist. And this book was written for athletes, but I kind of read it, applied it to my own professional development, and it really locked in my desire to want to go get that thing. So I thought I might just go ahead and share that.
Awesome. Well, we're going to wrap it up here. I want to say thank you to you all down there in Aggie land. It's been a pleasure. It's gone by fast. This is episode 2 of 2. So if you like this episode and you didn't hear episode 1, go back and listen. And we appreciate you all and look forward to getting together one day, hopefully soon. Take care.
Thanks a lot, guys.